appreciated that celebration. It was really eye-opening, and I congratulate you on it. I'm really happy you were able to get here on such short notice. And welcome very much in the audience, and welcome to Conversations. This program, we have a guest of the program I'm particularly pleased to welcome. His name is Gnoleba.
Yes.
It's one of those African names.
Definitely.
It's Gnoleba Seri, and he's the founder and the president and the chief executive officer of a very interesting organization, and his title is the African Chamber of Commerce in the United States. A really interesting idea. They're just getting themselves started the last couple of years. We're going to be talking about that and other matters. And Gnoleba, welcome very much to Conversation.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you for having me this afternoon.
It's my pleasure. You had a great gathering, and I'll tell you, it was just really eye-opening and such interesting and hard-driving people and so forth. I congratulate you on it.
Definitely.
But we'd like to start here with you. This is going to be the Gnoleba Hour.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you to share where your bio, in a certain sense, born and raised, that sort of thing, just as a way to wade in. But could you do that for us, and then we'll talk about the institution and that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Howard. Like you said, my name is Gnoleba Seri. I'm originally from the Ivory Coast.
Right.
In French, it's Côte d'Ivoire,
Yes.
and it's in the west part of Africa. I was a graduate of the Abidjan School of Law.
That's in
the Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
And then when I came to the United States in the beginning of the 90s, around 1992, 1993.
Yes.
I went back to law school here in the United States.
You're required to do that.
Exactly.
Is that true from all countries of the world, or is it,
It's true for countries that do not have a common law system.
So if you had a law degree from Cambridge?
India, for example, India or even Ghana or Nigeria, I wouldn't have been required to go through.
That is interesting, isn't it? So they want to teach their form of the law, and the common law is particularly English. And so if you were from Britain, if a barrister comes here or a solicitor comes here, they can practice, or they don't have to go through the law school?
You just have to take some credit courses and then take the bar exam.
That's a very interesting distinction.
Definitely.
Also, if I may, you're from Côte d'Ivoire. So your language, other than your indigenous language, we'll get to that, was French.
It's French.
So you had to learn English.
Definitely.
Had you learned English in Africa much, or what was it? Because one of the difficulties for people who are from overseas is the English language itself.
Definitely. I was fortunate enough to have learned English in law school in Abidjan, and then I worked 2 years for the Ivorian section of Amnesty International.
Oh, good. Yeah, great organization.
In the Ivory Coast, and I was the executive director of this organization. So we had a document in English. We had conversation in English. We went to international meetings, and they were all in English. So this is how I familiarized myself with.
So English was sort of, in a sense, in the air.
Exactly.
And it is around the world, it seems. It seems to be the language of the Internet.
Definitely.
Some people project that it will become the language of the world. I don't know.
Yeah.
But English, it's not taught in the grammar schools or in the younger grades. English, I mean.
In French-speaking countries.
Or I'm thinking of the world in a certain sense. You've got people, and then also the structure of things in Africa. There are tribal identities that are very important.
Definitely.
For a sense of identity.
Yes.
And some of those things maybe we could touch on, but it's just the English language is important. They just had a school open up next to where I live, teaching the English language to people who are from other lands and everything. And it's just jammed with people there wanting to learn English. And I understand the same is there in China. There's very great interest in learning English as a way to advance and so forth.
Definitely. And recently, even in Ivory Coast, in the French-speaking part, people are realizing that they need to, to teach English at an early age in the schools. So there was a recent movement in Africa to make sure that children of school age are bilingual at a very early stage in both French and English, which wasn't the case like a couple of years ago.
I see. That's interesting. That's a trend that we can see.
That's
and
a trend,
there were many people at the celebration, the 2-year, I think it was a 2-year celebration we attended, and there were other languages, but English seemed to be, particularly among the young, they seem to all be speaking English, and it's becoming, as Marshall McLuhan called it, a global village.
Definitely.
And that's something. That and the fact that you know French is a residue of the colonial era that followed Mr. Columbus and his discovery and so forth. Is that part, you're taught that, and the fact that after the Second World War, that model that had been there with the European influence in Africa, maybe we could just address that that's a large paradigm.
Yes. The European influence, especially the French influence in Africa, in the west part, was a major event, and in recent years, populations and also governments are trying to move away from this paradigm to embrace other
their own identity.
First, their own identification.
Absolutely.
This was done, even like early on, but now they're moving towards like, other civilization, other languages like, English and also Spanish and
well, those are
Portuguese,
both still European, but what about the native language? You have Kikuyu in Kenya, and you have other languages, Igbo, and you have these other identities that are important, and that's part of a national pride, I would think, and part of the context within which development's going on.
Definitely, and I think this took place, I can say easily 20 years ago, when right after the independences, government, saw the need to kind of go towards
nationalism,
the nationalism, and also the national language. So in ACCUS, for example, there were studies to promote 2 or 3 major languages, and at the university levels, there were studies to kind of put these languages in the written form and teach them.
All right, that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
it is a good thing because I think we have about 5,000 languages in the world, and they are disappearing. Many of the Amerindian languages are disappearing, and there's a rich cultural tradition you don't want to lose.
Yeah, definitely.
And so much of the identity that's so important to consciousness was targeted by the colonial overlords who wanted to impose their system upon your belief systems, and there was the white man's burden and all that kind of thing. We're all familiar with our history.
Definitely. And I think slowly but surely, populations and government in Africa made sure that, national, languages took over. For example, you have in Senegal, you have Wolof being spoken by half of the population, even those who are not from the Wolof or ethnic group. So in Ivory Coast, you have Baoulé, for example, in certain part of East Africa. See what I'm saying? So
you would have Swahili,
all these major languages being spoken by people on top of course, of either English or French.
It's an interesting intermix. You have a chairman of the board of your board of trustees, Mr. Diop, and he was going to try and be here, but he had to go off on urgent business to Senegal, so he wasn't able to. Look forward to talking to him in the future. But he gave an address, and he said it was there are 52 or 54 countries that emerged out of in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's kind of interesting. You got that kind of a division, and there were representatives at your meeting of a lot of them, and they have concern with business and development and all those sort of things, and it was a really interesting mix of people, very encouraging.
Definitely.
But is that about it? 54 countries?
54 countries in Africa, and in each country you can easily count 30 to 60 ethnic groups, and so in Ivory Coast, for example, you have easily 60 ethnic groups from the smallest to the largest.
Right, right.
And all living in diversity.
And those ethnic groups are very important, those ethnic identities.
Yes.
And
yes.
you have extended families, which are very rich in a way. And the model that that we had our revolution back in 1776 against the British, you know, that's you're familiar with.
Yeah, definitely.
But in France, so you would have learned Napoleonic law, which is different than common. So there's these differences.
The civil law.
Civil law. But you know, you have all these differences. And that now we're living in a global village, so your people in your organization want to be able to relate to the world, and they want to be able to relate to it in a realistic way, economically and politically and so forth. So there are very many important questions. But that's a beautiful quilt, you know, in a certain sense, of so many different identities that have to be vouchsafed as well.
Yes.
And you're concerned with all of that, all of those issues. At the chamber, I would presume.
Definitely, and I mean, we talk about the chamber, but one major concern we took into consideration when we were creating the chamber is, you know, of course, to make sure that, you know, Africa as a whole is represented within the chamber.
That's interesting. That's Pan-African sentiment?
Exactly.
You have interests collectively, like the European Union has interests collectively.
Exactly. We didn't want the chamber, for example, to be a group of just people from Nigeria or people from... We wanted to represent the entire Africa. And then even within this diversity, we made sure that different, you know, ethnic groups are being, especially the minorities in the different countries, are being included in what we want to do here. So we took into consideration this this major concern.
That's very important in a republic system, and so that you safeguard the interests of the minorities rather than just serving the interests of the majorities, which there's a natural tendency to do because money gets money and power gets money and that kind of thing. You've learned your lessons well on that.
Definitely, and it's why I mean, people, you wonder why the chamber, the African Chamber of Commerce in the United States, is in existence for only 2 years because.
Why wasn't it there a long time ago?
This is the point, because there were many initiatives that failed because, you know, for the reason we just talked about, people didn't take into account all these sensibilities, make sure that the organization reflects, you know, the diversity of Africa in terms of, you know, countries first, and also in terms of religion, in terms of, you know, ethnic groups, and so on and so forth. So we took extra care in making sure that the organization reflect and take into consideration all these concerns that are valid and
that's
trivial for some, but definitely very important for Africans that we are.
Absolutely, that's really important. I used to have a friend, his given name is out of Trinidad, it was Stokely Carmichael, and then he took the name Kwame Ture.
Okay.
And he was a Pan-Africanist, and he said, let's get united. And I also take interest in the fact that there's a great deal of attention, and I'm wondering, from the country of Libya, that they now have the African Union, and that's coming up down from the Mediterranean. But Mr. Gaddafi and his associates have taken great interest in Africa, which has been, in many people's mind, ignored too much by other traditional Western interests, private sector or government. And that's something that is there. He's taking a great deal of interest in that also. That's where Stokely and I met.
Yeah, definitely.
Was in the country of Libya.
Definitely, he's taking leadership into. Actually, he was one of the, you know, the people who put forth the African Union.
Yes, indeed.
Before that, it was the Organization of African Unity.
It wasn't so effective.
It wasn't effective. It was just a gathering of African head of state, and he came with the idea that it's about time that Africa, like
get its act together.
Exactly, and create or actually move beyond boundaries and create what can become the United States of Africa one
Yes,
day.
right. Well,
So,
yeah,
so this is really the fundamental idea behind the creation a couple of years ago of the African Union. And Gaddafi took great leadership into achieving that.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. You have, why can't they have a unity? You're anchored in Libya at the top of the continent, at the bottom you got South Africa with Mr. Mandela.
Yeah,
Mr. Mandela and Mr. Gaddafi got along very, very well.
Yes.
And they're both celebrated, and that's really interesting. So, and you came here in around 1990 or so.
Yes.
And how did you happen to come to the United States or New York?
Oh, it's a great, it's a long story. I told you I was working for Amnesty.
Yes.
So I had contact with the U.S. section of Amnesty International. I have many friends here with whom I was corresponding and talking and so on and so forth. And then I came here and I did stay, and this is how come I.
How was it? You remember the day, and how was it? And was it a big change? Had you traveled a great deal before when you were undergraduate and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I traveled a lot, especially when I was with Amnesty.
Great organization.
I went to Europe, but I never, I never came to the U.S. before.
But New York,
I did travel to Europe and to London, to Paris.
That gets you sort of acclimated toward New York,
yeah,
which is a unique kind of place, it seems to me. We were celebrating New York City as an and we had a wonderful address from the Commissioner on Immigration.
Yes.
Wonderful address, very charismatic, a good man, and that's a huge issue, how the United States is going to deal, with the immigration issue.
Definitely. I mean, the Commissioner, Dr. Guillermo Linares, is really a good friend of the African Chamber and our advocate, in the mayor's office. So I really want to publicly thank him.
Yes, he's a very charismatic man, and he's gone through hard scrabble himself and everything, and he's somebody we should pay attention to. He's got really very good ideas. So you came and you did, and to go through the law school. Did you have to go through the whole law school?
Yeah, I did.
It's a long grind.
I did 3 years of law school at the City University of New York School of Law in Queens. And I graduated in 2001.
Congratulations!
So
did you pass the bar on the first time? First time out?
Yeah, the first time.
Poor John Kennedy too had to go through it 3 times.
Hopefully. So I right now I'm a member of the New York State Bar Association.
Good.
And
Congratulations,
also the New Jersey Bar Association and the American Bar Association as a whole.
Wonderful. Well, welcome mightily, because you bring a great diversity, and I think your institution is really well placed because there's dynamics going on and that sort of thing. There's problems all over the world. But let's talk about if we could, about the African Chamber of Commerce, and we do have a couple of clips that are going to. They've been put together about it, but maybe you could introduce the chamber itself, and then we could show a clip maybe.
Basically, the first clip is about the introduction of the chamber, the reasons why we created the chamber and what the chamber is doing here in the United States. So we can.
Well, maybe let's see if we can set that up then in the booth and play that tape, and then we'll come back and talk to us. And we're talking again with Gnoleba Seri, and he's the founder, entrepreneurially inclined in that sense, and president and CEO of this major institution that's going to get only more major with each passing day, I would say. But let's set it up and run that tape now. I guess it runs about 3 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. So if we could run that introduction to the Chamber of Commerce, the African Chamber of Commerce in the United States. Here we go. That's too bad. We seem to be having time. You better come back to us, I guess, until you get it together.
The African Chamber of Commerce in the United States was created 2 years ago to both advocate for and promote African-owned businesses, which have been voiceless and powerless for too many decades to count. Presently, African-owned businesses are not striving because they act independently for each other, operate in isolation, and do not participate in the system. As a result of this non-participation, African businesses have no voice, no business opportunities, and lack access to public officials and corporations to help our community. It is also obvious that the city loses out on incalculable tax revenues in this dynamic as well. The African Chamber of Commerce has therefore been created to correct our current ways of doing business and to forge an alliance between African businesses and city agencies on one hand and corporate America on the other. The African Chamber aspires to be the instrument that will help African businesses and entrepreneurs navigate the maze of governmental regulations and to be the force that will provide the African businesses community with the necessary information, opportunities, and resources. The African Chamber of Commerce also intends to act as an intermediary between African-owned businesses and the private and public sectors. The second anniversary celebration of the African Chamber tonight has therefore been scheduled to introduce the organization to the general public and to the government officials, to present our work on behalf of African business in the city, and to explore ways in which ACCUS would receive the necessary help that will allow it to increase its activities.
Okay, well, that was an introduction.
Yeah.
I would like to have heard the mission statement, but I've read it, and it's good. Well done. You've worked that all out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That's really good. And you've been involved in banking. You've been involved in business here in the United States after your law studies and everything. So you've got backing in terms of understanding the business community.
Definitely. What's happened is when I graduated from law school, I started working with the City University of New York and in a project called the Citizenship and Immigration Project.
Okay.
I did that for about 8 years. And, and then in June of 2006, I decided to go on my own in the private sector. This is when I was confronted of insurmountable obstacle to open my practice. And I said to myself, as an attorney, if I'm facing these challenges, I can only imagine what, the other Africans who do not have the same understanding of the system that are facing. So I call a group of prominent African businesses to discuss these issues, to see what kind of issues they're facing. They have been confronted in creating their businesses, and promoting their businesses. So we have this meeting, and after this meeting, an idea was put forth to create this organization that we call the African Chamber of Commerce in the United States to help us promote here our businesses and make sure that we give the necessary information to our membership to allow them to participate in the system and then be in contact with the help they need.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, to understand the system in its nuance and how does it work. And a lot of that has to do with meeting people, what do you call it, meeting up and, you know, networking and that sort of thing with both people that have been born here and so forth and know the business world and the banking and so forth with people that are from other lands.
And also the private sector.
Yes.
Corporate America. So this was basically lacking, and we have been created to kind of fill this gap, make sure that Africans from the continent here in the United States who want to create their businesses, or even those who are already in business, you know,
could improve,
could improve, and then have access to business opportunities, contract opportunities, have access to all kind of procurement, you know, given out by the local, state, and federal governments.
Yeah, well, every township and city in the United States has a Chamber of Commerce. The United States has a Chamber of Commerce. Everybody has a Chamber of Commerce. Seems to me like it was a very good idea to bring the African community of interest into a Chamber of Commerce identity.
Definitely, and we didn't have to go too far, too far, because you know, we have Caribbean, Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce. We have a U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, a very powerful, you know, organization, national organization of, you know, Latino and Latina businesses in the United States. So we have a model, we have something already working and in place. So the African Chamber will, you know, simply mirror what it is to make sure that our membership has access to you know, all kind of advantages. And,
sure, why not? To work to their own advantage, and that you have these other things. I mean, you should have that sort of thing. Everybody else does, and it's very timely. It just seems. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you getting the idea, and it was very appropriate. And you mentioned the private sector, that's important. There's also the government. Understand the regulatory framework and the government, because there are these two entities that form the power and influence structure within our society. You want to be in touch with those decision makers in both realms, right?
And then bring them to the African community, the African business community.
And the African business community to them.
Definitely.
So you have networking and that sort of thing. That's something where a lot of things are done. A lot of that sort of thing is often done on the golf course.
Yes.
You know, that kind of thing. You know,
but
you understand.
Not there yet. But one day we'll be golfing.
Yes. Do you have a handicap? Do you play golf?
Not yet.
You're going to almost have
to. I can learn, but I'm
go out and hit
busy doing some other stuff.
I understand. That's really very good that you've done that. I congratulate you enormously on that, and it's really called for, and I think it's a very important institution. I only wish you all the very best.
Definitely.
Now we do have another clip, right? Yes. They were going to try and they'll be setting that up, and because the activities, it spells out some of the activities, including meetings, networking, sessions. You're going to bring business people from Africa for workshops and networking, again, with the people that are involved here within the American system. And I remember a lot of the people at your meeting said, New York's a great place for that, because you've got, if I'm not mistaken, the UN has something like 192 countries that are recognized at the United Nations, and they have sizable communities of something like 189 of those 192 countries in the New York City area. It's a beautiful place for you to set up your business.
This is the place to be. This is the place to be. And I mean, you touched to the second mission of the African Chamber of Commerce, because we just didn't want to be, you know, involved in business in the U.S. for the sake of making money. Of course, we want to promote our business, but we want to also make sure that we generate capital and expertise, and then take this capital and expertise and go and invest in our country, because the second mission of the African Chamber will be to further
development in Africa
and strengthen the private sector in Africa in terms of job creation, in terms of tax revenues, so that, you know, because we understand that the government cannot do all by itself in Africa. So it's our responsibility, African in the diaspora, to kind of organize within this chamber
And there's great opportunity there, entrepreneurial.
Definitely. This will help us first.
Yeah.
But also, and I want to stress it to our members, we want this organization to play a sustainable development role on the continent. We want every year, for example, to target one country where our membership will go and invest in different industries to strengthen the private sector, alleviate poverty, and give some tax revenues to the country, so that this may be the beginning of some type of development. So,
right, and there's entrepreneurial spirit there, and there's also almost like startup in many cases. You're just getting it together, and there's huge changes that are roiling the whole earth. So everybody's going through these big changes.
Definitely.
I was just thinking, in the case of the United States, say, between the change of the 19th century and the 20th century, 1899, and so the largest occupation in the United States was family farm.
Okay.
And then came the combines, and the agribusiness came, and it was a large, and so then they went into a factory. Okay. If you're on a, I mean, some of those values, if you're there, let's say in Africa, you're there, and you're in a family farming, there are important values, because you'd be doing something, you'd fix the cart, and then you would bring in the hay, or you would do something. Whereas after the industrialization came, those people were forced off the farms. They got big agribusiness going, very productive, Adam Smith, all that, very productive. But it put people in the factories of Detroit, where all day, they did the same thing. They would turn one nut. They would turn that. They would turn that. And that's very dehumanizing. Some of those things that are very efficient in terms of production is very dehumanizing. But you still have extended families. You still have very important socio-organizational structures that are very valuable in terms of identity and mutual good agreement between the people, less alienating perhaps than some of the pell-mell rush of capital-efficient systems of production that turn people into extensions of machines. If you understand what I mean. It's a very important lesson you all could teach us.
Definitely, I agree with your assessment. Two things. So far in Africa, we're not there yet. So thank God for that. And then
maybe you don't want to go pell-mell down that road.
Definitely. So we're learning that, and we want to make sure that we don't get to the point where everything is done through the machine, or even, human beings are turned into machines.
Or extensions of the machine only, and alienating.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. It's why one of our goals is, of course, we want to invest in industries and all that kind of stuff. But we also want
with some forethought about the social implications.
Definitely, and we want for those who want, there is a huge sector in Africa, not in the developed world, but in the developing countries. You have a huge sector called the informal sector.
Exactly.
Okay, so we don't want to destroy the informal sector.
Thank you.
We don't want to do that.
We've done that here altogether too much.
And this is where creativity is, and all this entrepreneurial, like, on a human, level is. So we want to promote that, so that these people can still be in, the small, level production.
Yeah, the level of real human interaction.
Exactly, and enjoy what they're doing, but also make sure that it's organized and it's making money, so that they don't, like, live in poverty.
Well,
it's kind of raise the standard of living.
That's right, because you get such enormous advantages to having all this thing done. But it's a thing that I think that's a lesson all the world is kept grappling with. That's not, but you have lessons to teach us. And you know what else you have lessons is the music. We had a fellow there doing the music, and they had African music, and they had a fellow DJ Gaddafi. He was DJing the thing. That music moved. moved, man.
definitely.
It was really good. They could teach us a lot culturally because the cultural extension from the West is all American movies, American television, all this so much. And I'll tell you, there were some sounds coming out of that DJ booth that were really inspiring in terms of new rhythms, new sounds, and that kind of thing. And so the cultural feedback from Africa is very rich. I mean, even at a popular level, much less classical dance and all that sort of thing.
Definitely. And we do not want to lose that. It's why our goal in making money is not just for, you know, self-aggrandizement or personal gain. We really want to use the chamber as a forefront organization to make sure that we give back, because I mean, being in the U.S. is a privilege. It's like we are the chosen one in terms of making sure that we look back and we see where we came from and what is still happening in our countries, and then in any way, shape, or form we need to go back and say, you know, this is what we learned from there. These are the good stuff. These are the not so good stuff.
Thank you.
And then let's, you know, copy. Let's not just copy what is coming to us, but we can still keep these and recognize that times have changed. So we need to abandon some of the custom and stuff like this, but we need to maintain our identity.
Absolutely, and celebrate some of those customs and those cultural norms, and now the music. And I think those fellas are getting out ahead of our our rock and roll people and so forth, because it's very authentic. It was wonderful, a wonderful kind of thing. And that's a larger issue because, like, we used to have out in Europe, they had 1,000 years after Rome, you had a feudal system. And there you had identity. You used to have emperors in Rome, and then you had kings. And that feudal system was all agriculture, and they called that system for 1,000 years, and people got their identity. I'm a baron of here, and you're a serf over here, and most of the people were serfs and so forth. But they did that. And then came the Industrial Revolution, and so they made a revolution, and they called that regime that had been in place, it's French. Maybe you can say it for me, Ancient regime. They called it the Ancient regime, the feudal houses, the kings, and so forth within Europe. Ancient, ancient regime. It was an order. Everybody got their identity by who they were related to, the duke or the king or the courtly houses, you know, and everything. And then there came a change. There was something new needed by the spirit of the age. So now we have a system the United States started, 1776, that kind of thing, Scottish Enlightenment, Adam Smith, all of that, we've studied it. But they have things in order that the future requires something other than the fulfillment of those institutional structures that we've inherited out of the experience of the American colonial or the European American colonial experience toward the rest of the world. And they are, in a certain sense, assuming they can impose that on the world, like the Ancient regime tried to impose feudalism as inherent to human nature or something. And the problem, we have did you ever know Pogo? That was a comic strip? Pogo said we found the enemy and the enemy is us. That we are so arrogant in thinking that what we have is so good, but there's something new needed beyond the international, even the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, all of these institutions have been formulated within a context of thinking that is outdated in terms of what the future requires. Leads toward that might be coming out of Africa more than they're going to be coming out of the Ancient regimes that have been established in 1776. You understand?
No.
Really?
Definitely. And I mean, we have. I mean, this is so true because I remember I was still in the Ivory Coast in the 80s when, you know, the IMF and the World Bank imposed all these structural adjustment, you know, programs in populations, and this created, you know, enormous, you know, uprising, deaf people, starvation, and so on and so forth. So you're right. We need to be careful and make sure that we kind of balance these institutions and say, you know, you're going too far.
In 1776, the people in Europe thought America was a bunch of bumpkins that just didn't understand how important it was to have a big wig. And then, but now it might be, Mr. Gaddafi particularly, he's got a lot of interesting models that are relevant to the future. But the trouble is, it's too damned interesting, and we want to show a second clip. Okay, we could talk forever, but we want to show this second clip, and maybe they could set that up, and it has to do a little bit more about
the second clip is basically about, the problem African businesses are facing here in the U.S., and then maybe we can talk about what some of the actions the chamber is taking to...
We have about 15 minutes left, so let's run that second clip from the DVD about the African Chamber of Commerce.
Hey! In July 2006, several prominent African business leaders met in New York City to identify problems facing African businesses. While some of these problems are common to all businesses, many are specific to African businesses, as they include cultural obstacles, the lack of knowledge about laws and regulations as they relate to businesses, the limited understanding of the financial and business world, the insurmountable difficulties in accessing finances to start a new business or improve an old one, the lack of credit history. We have identified communication skills as a roadblock that further prevents Africans from taking their goods and services beyond their own community, or to seek help from government agencies and nonprofit business organizations. Furthermore, the lack of organization has prevented government agencies and organizations to work effectively with African businesses. This is what explains that although New York City is an economy of small businesses, many of them owned by immigrants, including Africans, city agencies have not yet begun to incorporate African businesses in their overall economic development strategy. As a result of the above-mentioned roadblocks and challenges, African businesses do not develop beyond their initial growth phases. These challenges have caused many startups and even established businesses to go bankrupt, but most of them struggle to stay competitive. Lastly, these challenges have prevented city officials and agencies to adequately help African business grow significantly.
Much longer, and they could be in touch with your office, and you could have outreach to other press outlets and let them know. And congratulations on having put that together. And you have the website. Maybe you can say it here now. We got it at the end.
Okay, the website is www.africanccus.com.
Okay, African, that's easy, and it's CCUS, so that's Chamber of Commerce US.com. That's very easy to remember. It's a good, and it's pretty well put together.
Definitely, we're trying to provide information how to become a member, how to invest in Africa. We want corporate America to come to us if they want to invest in Africa, because we are working with local African chambers to make sure that our organization here in the U.S. is a bridge between, African countries and the U.S. so that, we do not recommend that businesses just go on their own to invest in Africa. Sometimes it may work, sometimes it might not. So
you could give them advice on the reality, the human realities of what's what.
Exactly, and the diversity issues, the local concerns of populations we just talked about at the beginning of the program, to American businesses before they go to Africa. One of the obstacles African businesses are facing in the U.S. We talk about it is a cultural barrier. What we mean by cultural barrier is the way in which we do business in Africa. And then when they come here, they want to bring this way of doing business, but it won't work.
What is a major in a paradigm, in a large-scale way, is different the way business is done in Africa and, say, here?
Regulations.
Here?
Here, regulation. In Africa, everything is done almost by, words, handshakes, and so on and so forth.
Okay, but there's a lot to be said for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, there is a lot. But what I'm saying is, when they get here, because they think that it's just easy to just operate a business, but beyond your specific business, you have state, local, state, and federal regulations.
Yeah, water boards and
all
the legal
zoning,
system with appeals.
Exactly, zoning, and also how to conduct business, corruption, how to report your taxes, how to... In Africa, all this is done on the informal level. But when you transpose this way of doing business here,
you're likely to get taken.
You may get away with it, but you won't grow, because in order to grow, you have to report your income. Banks need to know, what your books are. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, of
course. There's a way to do your
That's
your
called transparency.
Transparency
and accountability.
Exactly. People need to know, how much you made, how much you declare, and so on and so forth, in order to participate in the system. At the end of the day, if you play by the rule, you win. But if you do not play by the rule, if you want to operate, as if, there is no regulations, there is no, rules, and so on and so forth, you just stay, at a pops and mom level.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean by cultural barrier. So the American businessman or businesswoman who wants to invest in Africa, who do not understand the local, like the local intricacies, may find it difficult to invest or even generate profit. But what the chamber intends to do is to work with local African chambers. For example, we have very strong relations with the Ivorian Chamber of Commerce, the South African Chamber of Commerce, so that we can direct, American businesses who want to invest, for example, in South Africa towards our partners, and then they will be taken care of and make sure that they understand, the environment in which they're going to invest.
Okay, that's all really, really good, and I appreciate your saying it's important for the African coming here to understand the accountability and those kind of things. But those systems of the law, it was Churchill and others said the system can be a law, can be an ass, he said.
I understand.
And also the law can be an ass.
Yes.
And we used to have in the United States slavery, chattel slavery.
Yes.
And they had a law, and if you were a law-abiding citizen, it was called the Fugitive Slave Act.
Yes.
If a fugitive slave was away, it was your duty to turn them in to go back to the plantation to be a slave.
Yes.
And some of the laws are set up as a device that's going to guarantee the advantage of the very well-to-do. The law always supports the well-to-do, that sort of thing. So the law isn't, that accountability isn't all, there isn't enough accountability for a system that adequately gives a reasonable economic stake in the system to the people. So it's not all one way about how our system is so good. We just had a savings and we just had a a subprime thing going on where many, many good people had been sucked in, as it were, by Sharpies at the high level, at the government level, or at the major corporation level, and were sucked in, and they're now being foreclosed on their homes, being thrown out of their homes and that sort of thing. We had a Great Depression. All the great leaders, do you understand what I'm saying?
No,
it's not all one way.
It's
not all one way at all.
We are aware that many African businesses, especially the minority communities, people in the minority communities were, victims of these shocks you were talking about, and we have many in our membership who are losing. They
just say, we got a deal, pal, give you a good look, and then there's 30 pages of script that nobody could read, and in there was this high interest and structural adjustment and interest and making money and that kind of. So those systems that are in place are not to be just trusted as a one-way street. the trust that there is at a human level has to be brought into, and also the system has to be brought into a system where for the general population it's a better even shake than it has been throughout history, and that's a common problem in the world, no?
No,
you understand what I'm saying?
No, I agree.
We're going to learn from you on that score also,
definitely. But Harold, the general point I was trying to make is that if you want to operate in an environment to prosper and you have, for example, licensing rules and zoning rules and taxation and so on and so forth, if you want to prosper, you have to obey by this until we change them.
But why don't we get our rules more democratic? We do not have an economic democracy. We have somewhat of a truncated, they can get to vote. We have a plutocracy. All the world does. They have plutocracies, and the system is not in place that serves the interests of the masses to where they can be able to trust the validity of the system to give them an even shake. So they are just, they're going to be able to fleece the people with the laws that are in place. So it's not all, I'm just saying it's not all, there's changes that have to happen in terms of the whole organization of the world society, and we haven't gotten to that yet, but with organizations like the African Chamber of Commerce in the USA, you might be able to encourage public policy toward directions that are more democratic in a real, honest to God, not only political but economic order.
And whenever we structure, we be advocating for our members in terms of what we're talking about.
And your members can advocate for the people in a real democratic sense.
Exactly, and we put it forth and say, this is what the real, the little people, the little business people are feeling on the ground. So why can't we change this? Why can't we, how can we change this and improve this and so on and so forth? So we'll be doing this work. But my point is, in the meantime, our goal is to teach them how to participate in the system, so that because they're paying to the system, they can benefit from the system. And the reason we were given in the past was that as African, in the community you were not organized, but here we are, and I'm today on the show, on your show. Thank you for the opportunity you're giving us.
Just to start.
To tell the world that now African businesses, African in the diaspora are getting organized in terms of making sure that we participate in the system, generate capital expertise, and then go back to our countries to give back what we have learned and what we have achieved here. So I really do want to thank you for this great exposure your show is giving us today. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the African Chamber of Commerce, I would like to commend you for inviting us on your prestigious show.
Well, on this, mutual admiration society will form, right? Because I would like to thank you for bringing all this wit and wisdom and so forth and great culture and the rest of it to the United States and to the city of New York. You enrich it mightily, and so I thank you very much for that. And in most cases, it's not just a one-way street. There's learning going on back and forth, and we'll be learning as much as, or the system here. I'm critical of the system here, and I think that there's major changes needed there. I think we ought to be running the credits, I think, because I think we've come to the end of the hour, but it's really really a pleasure, and this is just the beginning of a wonderful friendship between you and myself.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you for the exposure.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what the story is as far as the credits. I didn't see them and everything, but you've been your pleasure to have the perceptions of Gnoleba Seri. He's the founder and the President and Chief Executive Officer of a major institution that's emerging stronger now with every passing day, the African Chamber of Commerce in the United States, a major cultural institution and business and political implication institution. I congratulate you and all your colleagues on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for viewing. So it's really good to talk to you. We could go on talking for many hours. And this is just the beginning, Noli. We're going to be getting together with you. I'd like to see Mr. Diop if we can. And I'd like to encourage you to become a producer.
No. I will go through the document and contact you on that.
Good, we're going to be in touch with one another.
This is
I don't understand. I'm a little confused what's going on because we've run over and, okay, I think we have to just unmic and everything because I don't, okay, let me go and find out what's going on. Yeah, we gotta sit down.
Okay, yeah, to do this stuff.
Yeah. I don't know, something got messed up. So we're still here talking with Gnoleba Seri, and they're going to let the credits run and so forth. We seem to have had a problem. We ran out of, I got a mix-up on the timing. Sorry, I thought that we had less. I thought we'd come to the end, but apparently not. They're going to run the credits then and then let them see. And it's been really good to talk to you. Sorry about the confusion, but anyway, it was really good talking to you. It's just the beginning. Yeah. And we'd like you to be able to become a producer here.
Yeah, definitely.
And you consider that. We gave you the papers and that sort of thing.
Yes,
and you would be encouraged to do that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where, it's very confusing because the timing got confused. But, I don't know what, they're going to run the credits? Are we going to run the credits or not? I don't understand why they're not running the credits.
Yeah.
And there was a mix-up on the time, and so well, it's confusing. So anyway, it's really good talking to you. And how many members are there now?
Right now we have 500 members.
That's good. That's good.
500 members, and we will step up our outreach efforts. And we were confined in the Tri-State area. Now we want to go to other states, and you know, with this show and
500. How many did you start with when you first started?
We were 36.
36 only, yeah.
We were 36.
And the idea probably came over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way it happens. You see.
Yeah, very determined people. You know, we were thinking about the kind of business association we would create, and we went with the idea of a chamber because, you know, this is what exists, and everybody knows what a chamber is and what a chamber does. And
well, if you only had 36, you only had 36 when you started, and you were probably only a couple of you over a coffee cave, and you've grown to 500.